Patty, thank you so much for agreeing to talk to me today on the Thrive in Wabash County podcast. I've been so excited to record this episode with you for a variety of reasons I'm sure that we'll get into. But for our listeners, first and foremost, just introduce yourself if they've not had the opportunity to meet Patty Grant.
Oh, Alex, thank you. I'm so excited to be talking to you in this amazing room, and congratulations on all the efforts that you're making, all the things that you're doing for the county. Okay, so my maiden name is Strauss. I'm Patty Strauss Grant. I grew up here in North Manchester, was gone for undergrad, moved to Chicago for a while, and came back. In 1989, I started volunteering as a board member for the Community Foundation of Wabash County, which I think is what we're going to talk about today. So that's a long time ago. I served as a board member and a volunteer and enjoyed very much the work.
Patty, you talk about your board service at the Community Foundation. When did you join the board for the Community Foundation of Wabash County?
1989. It was a 20-member board, and it was exclusively the Community Foundation of North Manchester at that time.
Okay, so when did the Community Foundation begin as an organization?
1954, one of the first in the state, yeah.
And community foundations today compared to where they were at back in when ours started in 1950s to when you joined the board, talk a little bit about that, maybe just in the evolution you've seen since joining as a board member.
Yeah, so the early history of the Community Foundation of Wabash County is that it was primarily focused on being service to donors. And prior to 1990, service to donors meant almost exclusively promoting the foundation as a vehicle for planned or testamentary gifts, not so much current gifts, right? And then in 1990, with the advent of the Lilly Endowment Gift Initiative, the Community Foundation could change its focus. Not so much, we were still service to donors, but expanded it to current giving, right? Because at that time, the Lilly Endowment initiatives, their matching initiatives afforded a dollar-for-dollar match into the donors fund. So the foundation spent a great deal of time talking about how endowments work, how can you fund your endowment, types of gifts, types of funds. We were cutting our teeth on investment practices as well, embracing the community, trying to learn more about nonprofits and their needs. That was the focus still, was service to donors, but it expanded, as I said, to current giving. And you know, Alex, as a result of that, we have more than 100 designated endowments that serve area nonprofits. And that was very formative organizationally because it gave us the chance to create relationships, to understand what nonprofits were doing, and to understand the needs of the community. Service to donors remained the focus as well because at that time the Community Foundation had very, very little or limited discretionary assets. So in terms of making grants with our what we would call the foundation's money, its money, as opposed to those designated endowments had to be limited because we didn't have a lot. Jean Foss, Sharon Beecham, and others were on a grants committee. They worked very hard with what I would call very limited assets to make grants. So that continued through the 1990s. In 2000, the Lilly Endowment started initiating gift initiatives which provided to build unrestricted endowments. So our unrestricted endowments grew. I think you know they're roughly 10 million today, and that afforded us the opportunity to be a little more strategic, right? Similarly, in 1998, the Lilly Endowment introduced the Lilly Endowment Community Scholarship. Well, that immediately immersed all community foundations in the state in the business of education, really did. It pushed us into understanding what are the barriers to educational, post-secondary education in particular.
And so, Patty, for the listener that may not be as familiar with the educational space, talk a little bit about what is post-secondary educational attainment.
Well, secondary school is through high school. Post-secondary is anything afterward. That can certainly include traditional bachelor's degree, associate's degree, and then certifications and training that's related to workforce development and skill development.
Perfect.
So the Lilly Endowment Community Scholarship is limited to a 4-year degree. Perhaps most of your listeners know that's a 4-year scholarship fully paid by the Lilly Endowment. But to develop that and to spread that across the county, the Community Foundation spent a lot of time understanding and accessing high school seniors, and from that developed a pretty robust scholarship program. You also know we have close to $9 million in traditional post-secondary scholarship funds, and that was really born out of our developing the Lilly Endowment Community Scholarship, right? So, the early years were the focus on donor services. That hasn't changed. That remains a mainstay and will always be a mainstay. Promoting the foundation as the vehicle for individuals with charitable goals to have those executed, whether they're current or whether they're testamentary. That's a core purpose of the Community Foundation. But because of some help from the Lilly Endowment in pushing us into different areas, we now have unrestricted endowments and can be a more strategic grant maker. And then through the work in education, have come to focus on that.
Patty, you've spoken so far a little bit about our unrestricted assets at the Community Foundation, around $10 million. You talk about our scholarship assets, around $9 million. Before we go any further to get really into the weeds of now what the Community Foundation's leaned into from an educational attainment perspective, community leadership initiatives, and still maintaining the gifts and grants and the activity within supporting organizations and students from Wabash County, just for the listener, the scope and scale of the Community Foundation today versus maybe when you started as a board member in terms of asset size, and then maybe even when you started on staff versus where the Community Foundation of Wabash County sits today in 2025?
Oh, well, it's changed quite a bit. When prior to Lilly Endowment, there was a 20-member board that met 4 times a year. And Ralph Narrigan, who is a CPA, Manchester University grad, terrific community leader, was extremely helpful. He took care of all the financial matters. But up to 1990, the foundation's work was receiving a testamentary gift and executing it. You probably know the MRA, the sports park, as a result of the Glenn Ruppel estate. He left a shopping list with the Community Foundation, right? This is what I'd like you to do with my money. Included in that was, in fact, an outdoor pool that the foundation looked at and said, I don't think we can do that. They built the sports park. So there was no staff member. And again, I would credit Ralph Narrigan for doing so much of what staff would have done. When Lilly introduced the gift initiative, they required a location and at least a half-time person. We were very fortunate to hire Carol Horn. She's very generous and able, sympathetic leader who continued with the Community Foundation through 2000. But that was a part-time person. So then in the 90s with the gift initiative, you ended up having a lot of board members like me that were free and able to do a lot of the work. So in my case, I was a development chair and then marketing chair. I helped develop the first scholarship application for the Lilly Scholarship. So think about that, Alex. It was a half-time person. Then we were able to hire an administrator. There was 2 people. In the early 2000s, we had 3. Mike Stone joined us to administer another Lilly grant that we received. So now look at you. You're managing a staff of 6, 7 people, right? We've been helped and aided along the way by Al Schlitt, who has, just given and given and given to the Community Foundation at no charge, always available, and always very, very helpful. So the assets in 1954, I'm told, were roughly 15,000, and we have over 100 million now. And that speaks also to the generosity and the dedication of the Wabash County community of individuals who care deeply about this place, want to preserve all the good things and assist and help people that are struggling to have a better life also. So
absolutely. Thank you, Patty.
Yep. Staff has grown, human capacity, financial capacity. And I would add that the competencies of the Community Foundation with your hire and the things that you bring, Julie Garber is a very talented grant maker. And that has happened as a result of the experiences with donors, working with nonprofits. We think that we are a skilled grant maker and know a lot about the county and the needs of the county. And that's as a result of all of those years and the people that worked very hard before me.
Absolutely. And the Lilly Endowment really was asking and has continued to ask community foundations to lean in and lead in a position within a community now that spans much further than just grants, gifts, scholarships. While that maintains the core piece of community foundations, I would say that the Community Foundation of Wabash County is so well positioned in our community today as an institution because of your work, your leadership, first as a volunteer, then leading our organization the last 13 years. It's a unique place within a community, right? Community foundations have a unique place within a community. We've talked on this podcast before. You speak about the generosity that exists here in Wabash County. My goodness, we are fortunate as a community, and you can look around. It's not hard to see that every day in our community with new initiatives, with projects that came over a decade ago, to see that. It's tangible. We can feel that. But the Community Foundation as an organization is a testament to that generosity. And we are so fortunate. I am so fortunate now to be in a role and a position to steward that into the future, right? And just selfishly speaking, for our organization, the position of our organization, so fortunate, Patty, to come after you and your leadership and all that you did for the foundation to take it to where it's at today, and now to be in a position to steward that into the future is not something, as you know, that I take lightly, but just so fortunate because of your leadership and many others that it's in the place that it is today.
Well, thank you, but it was through me, not by me. And there are so many people that helped with the growth of the Community Foundation. You are right about Lilly Endowment is pushing community foundations to take a leadership role. I wasn't in the room, but apparently the then chairman of the Lilly Endowment, Clay Robbins, at one point in time said, "We didn't put you all in business to be a bank." And so that meant we don't want you to just manage the assets. That's a big job. That's, we're grateful that you do that prudently and wisely. But we are hoping and expecting you to understand the needs of your community and take a leadership position, which I think we have.
Patty, one of the flagship program and initiative of the Community Foundation, starting back in 2016, is evolved, changed names, changed branding. That program that we'll get into now, Imagine Early, what's called Imagine Early today, if you'd be willing to share some of the history of that program and then the evolution of the program and where it sits today, because that is exactly what the chairman of the Lilly Endowment at the time would be talking about, right? For a community foundation.
I hope he's pleased with that for sure.
Absolutely.
And so going back to our early history, talking about being in a position to be a little less transactional with gifts and grants because we have unrestricted endowments, because we were well immersed in the scholarship business and had understood the barriers to educational attainment. In 2012, which was about a year after I started, through a strategic plan, was actually helped by Mike Stone, the board prioritized educational attainment as the most pressing need for the county. I am immensely proud of the prior grant making that the foundation did. It was formative. It was very helpful in us creating relationships and understanding the needs of the county. But I think there was a growing sense at that time, like, yes, we want to help the nonprofits, but are we moving the needle? And so then with Mike, we prioritized educational attainment. It's curious, at the same time, Jason Callahan, who was then superintendent of Wabash County Schools, and Clint Kugler, who was president of the Y, were noodling about how to close the achievement gap, which is one of the pillars of the WISE mission. And they started studying CSAs, which is children's savings accounts across the United States. There's about 120 different programs, and determined that the way to help Wabash County students was to enroll every kindergartner through third grade student in the county with Indiana's College Choice 529 program. You know that the 529 has tax advantages, and that's great, but beyond that, CSAs have been shown to help families start to think about education, can have the power to change the identity of a student when they know that they have a college fund, et cetera, et cetera. So Clint Kugler actually came to us and said, would you help fund this program? That was in 2013. They had very successful years. They did a great job and enrolled more than 50% of their target audience with the Indiana College Choice 529 plan, which is the national average is 6%, right? They were helped by and encouraged by participation with the public schools. That was tremendous. They had a private donor that seeded, et cetera. So then fast forward, they caught the attention of the Charles Stewart Mott Foundation. Mr. Mott founded General Motors. They're located in Flint, Michigan. And with the leadership of an amazing program officer by the name of Benita Melton, the Mott Foundation had pledged a 10-year initiative to advance CSAs in the United States. A very creative grant maker. Mott funds think tanks and universities, and not lobbyists, but those that study the way of Washington. And they funded 3 programs, boots on the ground programs, a county, Wabash County, ultimately, a state. They also supported a program in the state of Maine called the Harold Alfond, and then also supported some work in San Francisco. So a state, a city, and a county. The Mott Foundation was interested in the work that Jason and Clint were doing. They introduced Mott to the Community Foundation, and in 2015, we were invited to submit a proposal to reimagine the delivery of post-secondary education. Well, what does that mean? It means instead of waiting for the 18 years of public education, what if you could give those assets to students early? How would that shape their trajectory in education? And so we submitted a proposal. It was accepted in 2016. We launched the Early Award Scholarship Program. And essentially, it's a CSA platform, right? Students do their work in school. We award money into an individual account that is intended for the student, and they can use that then for post-secondary education. We believe that the early delivery addresses some of the limitations, right, of traditional scholarships. That is, traditional scholarships have a limited ability to motivate early learning in the 3rd or 4th grade. They're simply too far away. They have a limited ability to shape identity, right? I'm a college student because I have this fund, right? Well, it's too far away. And then finally, my colleague and I, Julie Garber, often felt that our traditional scholarships were not meeting the needs of low-income families, because too often, sadly, children in low-income families had decided that post-secondary education wasn't for them. And so by awarding the assets early, we believe that we're influencing identity, influencing an expectation that I can go to college too. If students in the program do everything that they can in terms of savings and their in-school work, they could, with good markets, they could receive about $2,000 upon graduating. So that was an easy yes when asked and invited. Will you submit a proposal? I remember taking it to the board and saying, potentially this is risky. I don't know if it's going to work. We don't know how this is going to go, but let's try this because I believe it will address our mission and what we just prioritized, which was educational attainment.
And this would have been 2015, 2016 timeframe.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. I credit Steve Henkin was board chair at the time, Dave Mann, Josh Petrino, others that were like, okay, all right, let's give this a try. Someone is offering us an opportunity. So I was happy to do it.
Absolutely. Patty, we'll get into the next almost 10 years now of the program then after it's started, and just some of the work of the University of Michigan and studying the program and those metrics. But just at this point, why does post-secondary educational attainment matter to a listener, right? Just if somebody's listening to this and says, gosh, yeah, but college isn't for anybody, or doing something after high school isn't for anybody, how is post-secondary educational attainment a part of a larger picture for a community or for an individual?
Alex, there's study after study after study that has demonstrated that education beyond high school, provides a better life, right? More opportunities. There's all sorts of research about that. But for Wabash County in particular, we need and want a skilled labor force. We need and want for our citizens to have high-paying jobs that afford a livable wage, that provide for their families and a home and a car. And that's part of the prosperity that we want for all Wabash County citizens. And time and time again, research will show that the path to that requires education after high school. It wasn't always that way, right? My dad ran companies here. He could talk about how he'd have an employee for 2 weeks and there was an abundant amount of jobs. Somebody could work for him for a month and go someplace else and someplace else and someplace else. That's not as much the case now, I don't believe. Our friend Michael Hicks, whom we champion, can tell you over and over again, there are not enough unskilled jobs to support the economy and the life that we want for our citizens in Indiana. So,
Michael Hicks goes a step further even to say from a community's viability, can almost single-handedly pinpoint educational attainment rate, and he can tell you the success or the failure or the trend of a community, right?
Yeah, based on its education.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Thanks, Patty. I just think that that's important. It feels a little bit odd asking questions in this interview, right? Because I've been so fortunate with the transition from when you've retired to now me in the role, the amount of time that you've been so gracious and continuing to support me, but definitely in the onboarding period, that a lot of these things I've come to know, learn, and love because of you teaching me, right? And so asking these questions hopefully is a way for our listener to feel a little bit about what I'm so fortunate and get to enjoy every day. And it's because of how you have taught me and the work that I've gotten to witness you do the last few years in the county and the community. So these questions, I don't want the listener to feel that, gosh, shouldn't Alex know that running the Community Foundation now? But I just want them to be able to experience a small piece of this work and how fortunate we are to get to do the work we get to do every day.
Well, and Alex, the work that you're taking up and took up with Imagine 185, educational attainment was pointed to over and over and over again. And of the 85 recommendations, there's many, many that hope to connect our citizens with employers and to identify the skills that they need. And that's going on at the state level too. I appreciate your comments regarding me or the board's leadership, but this is a common for all Indiana communities, right?
Absolutely. It's a common challenge that communities, rural communities face especially, but what I think this podcast has allowed us the opportunity to do and highlight is how Wabash County is positioning itself to do things differently and attack those systemic challenges that other places are facing. We know if we want a different outcome here in Wabash County, we have to do things differently. And this initiative, this program is at the top of the list of one of the ways that we've done that and continue to do that.
It is doing scholarships differently. And it's hopefully picking up and able to reach a group. There's many, many students that are very successful through their public education. And traditional scholarships reward past success. And what we want to try to do with the early award is to encourage current success, right? 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8th graders. You can do it. And we're going to reward your every step so that you can continue beyond high school.
One thing I appreciate the most of hearing you speak about Imagine Early in the past, and what I now appreciate the most about the program, is that Imagine Early, yes, it's focused on shifting parents and children's mindset around how they think about assets and building assets, right? There's that psychological piece that it focuses on and that we address with the Imagine Early program. And a listener may say, $2,000 at the end of 8th grade, wow, that's not going to pay for a 4-year college degree, right? But just speak a little bit to what's unique about the Imagine Early program and Wabash County's program versus the other CSAs that may be out there. And the second thing that the program does when it's aiming to shift perspective of both parents and students.
So children's savings accounts originally are founded solely around savings, and that is the pattern in the rest of the United States, right? And what that means is whatever the vehicle, whether some people use depository accounts as opposed to a 529. The children's savings account is dependent upon a parent's savings. And it could be a municipality or a private donor that would match a contribution by a parent. What's unique about the Early Award Scholarship Program is that it's dependent, earning the assets, building the assets is dependent upon a student's agency in the classroom. And so not the parent's behavior, but we are rewarding behaviors that lead to educational success. We don't award a test result. We award a student in the 4th grade that does all of their reading assignments, all of their math assignments. And that's different. That's rewarding behaviors and reinforcing the behaviors that lead to greater learning. Joanne Case is the program officer. She's done an absolutely fabulous job. Some of the support that we've provided. And by the way, we couldn't do this program without the support of the public schools, and they have been very supportive, demonstrating their interest and their dedication to the success of their students, and there's the success of their students beyond high school. But you're right, we did meet opposition and skepticism by saying, what's a couple $100 in the 8th grade, or how is this going to contribute? But the research that's related not only to our program but to CSAs is that having assets contributes to a college-bound identity. It changes parental expectations regarding educational attainments. It changes in-school student behavior, knowing that it's a tangible asset. Dr. Elliott at the University of Michigan calls it tangible hope. It's something that a student can understand and appreciate. I have this account. And then you mentioned the University of Michigan Center for Assets, Education, and Inclusion under the leadership of Dr. William Elliott, who is the lead researcher in the United States on CSAs, has been evaluating Wabash County's CSA, first the WISE program and then the Community Foundation, since 2015. And the results of his studies have been very, very promising. We know that our students are scoring higher on standardized tests. We know our students that are participating in Imagine Early have fewer markers for bad behaviors. They have the social and emotional skills that are needed to succeed in school, right? We know that our parents are saving more often because they've enrolled the kids in their program. They've embraced the idea that my student will attend school beyond high school. And I'm betting you probably know some of the rest of the statistics that I'm failing to remember right now. But we've been very encouraged. And you know what? So are the other programs in the nation. They're looking at Wabash County and saying, what kind of results are we getting? The final test, though, as you know, Alex, will come when Dr. Elliott follows the students that have been in our program. The graduates of 2025 are the ones that would have had the full 5 years of intervention.
The high school graduates.
That's right. I'm sorry.
Yep.
So they had full 5 years, grades 4 through 8. And then he wants to follow some of those students to see the frequency at which they go to college or post-secondary ed versus non-participants, and then their completion rates. Because that's the hope and the promise of a CSA program, is that it impacts, ultimately, post-secondary ed.
Absolutely. Patty, we talk a lot about in Wabash County that one thing that we believe sets our community apart from other communities is that we invest in our people here, right? And this program is the flagship of that. We are literally investing in our young people, in our future, in this community, right? And you speaking about the University of Michigan and how across the country people have eyes on the research and the outcomes from the Imagine Early program that we've been so fortunate, both the Community Foundation and Wabash County, to have here.
Yeah, you're right. And we've been fortunate to continue to receive funding from the Mott Foundation now since 2016. I'm very pleased to have their support, but I add that their support is less than half of what it takes to run the program. And when I say run the program, well, what does that mean? You know, Terry Sprunger manages the database of over 10,000 students. Joanne Case is in our schools, meeting with parents and teachers daily, you know, supporting and helping to increase enrollment, as well as your leadership and the evaluation of the University of Michigan. So it's not an inexpensive program, but I'm really happy and proud to say that Mott's contribution is only half. The community has embraced that through private donations to say, this is a different way. Let's do more of this. And it's a long-term program too, Alex. It's not done in a day. These are complicated issues for families to encourage post-secondary ed, and it can't be done in a year or two. Right?
And it's complicated for communities, right? This is a challenge that, as you had mentioned earlier, right, is going on across the state and across the country. And so it's not going to be solved in a day, but the outcomes of this program and the community support, Patty, not to get too far in the weeds, but just for the listener, when you say that the community has stepped up, talk a little bit about Operation Change the Future and the Imagine Early piece, and then maybe that's a good transition in terms of how the Community Foundation and Wabash County in general isn't just addressing educational attainment with the Imagine Early program, but the other ways.
Yeah, so back to 2012, right, when we prioritized educational attainment, at that time we said with limited resources, we were only going to do the bookends. So that meant early childhood education and care, and then post-secondary and adult ed. Julie Garber, who's Vice President for Strategic Initiatives, has done a fabulous job in working on early childhood, and she will say, you know, I've been doing this, and we've been nicking away at it, and it's also a more thorny problem. What am I talking about? The availability, the affordability, accessibility, and the quality of early childhood care and education. So it was actually Jason Callahan who brought Begindergarten to us. That was one of the first things we did in 2012 was to fund a preschool, kind of an intensive 2-week course for each of our public schools for children who had never had any preschool experience. And anyway, through the years, by 2022, we did a strategic plan, and looking at the work that Julie Garber did and then Imagine Early, we launched the Operation Change the Future plan. That also came out of Imagine 185. The future that we want to change is that of declining population. And so we were marrying the work of the population study with our educational attainment programs. Operation Change the Future was a campaign to raise $4 million, split evenly between the early childhood education and care initiatives and Imagine Early, with some portion of it was $500,000 or $1 million to go to an endowment that would support those initiatives. I'm very pleased to say the community embraced that vision, embraced the work that the Community Foundation was doing, which is humbling, you know, and that level of trust and the belief that we received from the community is remarkable and wonderful, right? So we successfully raised the $4 million. Again, $2 million to early childhood and the other to Imagine Early.
Absolutely. Thank you, Patty.
Yeah.
Speak a little bit about, under your leadership when you were with the Community Foundation, some of those things that the Community Foundation stepped up in different community leadership initiatives or efforts outside of the educational attainment space, just so the listener has an appreciation maybe for some of those other issues that may not be a program of the Community Foundation, but different things that you worked on in your time at the Community Foundation.
So when you have the opportunity to work with donors, and then as a grant maker, when you have the opportunity to work with nonprofits, you get asked, can you help? How can you help? One thing that comes to mind more recently is the Stockdale Mill. It's a great, wonderful asset to the community, and the individuals that were so dedicated to seeing that it would go forward came to us. Now, did we give them a ton of money? No. I mean, but could we help them maybe shape some fundraising, or at least talk to them about our other experiences and how did that go about? We did that. I was pleased for that relationship. Similarly, here in Wabash, the all-inclusive park, Shelley Myers did a tremendously great job in raising money for that. Behind the scenes, I'd like to think it was something that we could participate with as well. There are other examples where individuals want to get something done, right, charitably. It may or may not require a fund or an endowment. It may ultimately not have the assets. Daniel's Place, that was an example of a fund that got set up at the Community Foundation. You know as well, Alex, that we feel that it's a part of our responsibility to help individuals who want to do charitable work without requiring them to go get their own 501c3. So that's an example. Also then, along with Grow Wabash County, Keith Gillenwater, we used Lilly Endowment money to launch a study about population decline, from which the Imagine 185 comprehensive plan was born. That's not particularly about educational attainment. It's about trying to address and understand the population loss, wanting to support that. So those are a couple examples.
And Imagine 185 is comprehensive, as you've said, across many different areas that may not be directly education focused. But if you think, to your point earlier, Patty, the work of post-secondary educational attainment, how that touches so many different things and is so woven together. Think about the ability for our community and the work of Wabash County to attract a new business here. Mm-hmm. That business is likely locating to an area where there's an educated and skilled workforce, right? And so while it may not be the only initiative in Imagine 185, really it's at the core of a lot of the different challenges that our community faces.
Yeah, we think so.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Patty, if you could pinpoint one experience or one thing in your time at the Community Foundation as a board member and then as executive director, president, CEO, what is something you're most proud of?
I'm not sure. It probably isn't going to answer the question exactly. What I am most proud of, I think, is the talent that we've been able to attract. And I hold you in that group. I couldn't, to have you take the leadership is an accomplishment that I'm really proud of. But then board members as well, right? We have very talented and dedicated board members, talented staff. So I think that's an organizational accomplishment, something that I'm proud of, to be able to attract the talent and dedication and the desire and the passion on the part of the people that we work with, so that we can further our mission, right? It takes people. So it's the human capital that we have that I'm probably the most proud of, both board and staff, and the relationships that we've been able to build. Building the Imagine early was probably a pretty formative thing, right? I mean, I'm proud of that. From the ground up, like, how do we do this? And again, with the help of the public schools, I think we did focus groups with teachers, and we asked them, if you could pay your student to do anything, what is it that you want to do? And overwhelmingly, they said, we just want them to do the work that we asked them to do. So fine, great, we'll do that. Everybody that completes their homework in the 4th grade gets $20 a quarter for their math, right? So absolutely. I'm proud of that.
For the listeners who may not have had the privilege of getting to meet you, Patty, or work alongside you, your answer to that question is one of the things I've always respected the most, just the humility and servant's heart that you have to never take the credit, to always credit others, and to make a comment of, after we've spent some time talking about the Imagine Early initiative and how much of a game changer that is today and will continue to be for the future of our kids and of our community, to say that probably the Imagine Early initiative is just speaks to your personality. And so that's what I know that I've looked up to you and appreciate about you. And I know countless others that have had the opportunity to work with you would all say about you and your leadership.
Well, thanks.
On that note, though, Patty, thinking about your career, you've continued to give credit to others, to the team. Who would you say in your entire career, your life, and now looking back that you're retired, has been the most influential on your career, on what you've been able to accomplish?
Certainly my mom and my dad, Don and Billy Strauss. My dad was exceptionally hardworking and demanding, and he required performance and purpose in those people around him. I had the benefit of, my mom, my grandmother Strauss, my Aunt Joanne, and my sister Sally, who, unlike my dad, not unlike, my dad was kind too, but those women in my life were exceptionally, intensely loyal, generous, kind, and gracious, right? So that was very influential. I've known David, my husband, since 1977. He's an avid reader. He's a critical thinker, interested in, history and philosophy. So he's given me a lot of perspective that I wouldn't have otherwise had. At the Community Foundation, the county is indebted to the early work of Ralph Narrigan and Al Schlett, and early board members. They were visionary and were willing to take risks and take things on, right? And then more recently, board members Brian Howenstein and Brian Pease, Cindy Seitz was a board member and now serves as our treasurer, right? Or contract CFO. And there are many other board members that have been very generous with their time. Brian Howenstein, I think if you call him, and if you haven't called him, he'll say, "What can I do? How can I help? What do you need?" He's incredibly generous with his time and cares deeply about the outcomes of the Community Foundation. Those have been joyful relationships to go, as you would say, no light between our shoulders, right? We are together. We want these things to happen, and how do we get that done? So.
Absolutely. Patty, you have poured your career, your heart, your soul into this work. And now on retirement, what are you looking most forward to in your retirement?
Well, I have been enjoying, since March 28th, I've enjoyed the freedom and the time to make a choice. I absolutely cherish my time at the Community Foundation and the work. But as you know, Alex, you're never done. You can work 10-hour days if you want. There's always someone else to call. There's always another document to read. There's always another letter to write. So, it was demanding. And so I'm just the time suddenly to make a choice. David and I do plan to travel a lot. Now I have the freedom, a daughter in Denver, a daughter in Chicago, a daughter in Fort Wayne. I have more time to be with them, and that's wonderful.
Almost living your entire life in Wabash County outside of going to school, right? What would you say is your favorite thing or favorite part about Wabash County?
Well, I'll tell you a story. I have many close friends from high school, but 3 in particular, and we all decided we wanted to do something, an extended time together. And when we said, what do we want to do, they all wanted to come back to North Manchester. We weren't going to New York to see plays or whatever. They wanted to be here in Wabash County. And it was great to listen to them and experience what they think about Wabash County for things that perhaps I take for granted, right? And it caused me to really think about what I love also about Wabash County. So we kayaked down the Eel River. I would name the open spaces and the outdoors as something that I love, right, about here. 2 rivers, a reservoir. I love the historic buildings in each of our towns. They're just gems, right? We're a part of early America, and that part of history is so valuable and wonderful to preserve. It's part of our identity. I've had the pleasure to serve at Manchester University as a trustee. I've gotten, to pull back the curtain on what they're about. I'm immensely proud of that. My friends just like to drive around and see spaces that they don't have in their own communities, right? The spaciousness. So those are some of the things I love. Certainly the Honeywell Center. And again, Alex, to meet up with these generous and dedicated people over and over again. It's a lovely place to live.
Absolutely. Patty, you've gotten so much accomplished in your time in this community, leading the Community Foundation. What would you say is the greatest opportunity for Wabash County moving into the future?
Well, greatest opportunity is to keep hammering away at educational attainment in all forms, whether that's clubs that serve youth or, the early childhood centers, invest in our young people and make them feel a part and a belong and that we care about them and give them a leg up through assets, right? I think it's really important. I would add that for any young person or anyone that finds themselves in a leadership position, say yes first. If I typify the Community Foundation dating back for a long way, like to meet a donor or to meet a grantee, to talk to a nonprofit that's trying to get something done, say yes. Say yes until you can't figure it out, right? It's okay to be a risk taker if you surround yourself with trusted people that want the same thing that you want and see your hard work. There's lots of opportunity.
Patty, before the interview and when we scheduled this, I'd sent you just a list of questions and things to talk about. And I think the last question that I'd sent you was, if you had advice for young people, what would that advice be right now at the end of your career, looking back? And you just answered that a little bit off script. You've been so incredibly helpful for me, but advice for me now in the role of President CEO at the Community Foundation, you have shared so much institutional knowledge, professional advice, that even prior to the role that I was so fortunate to get to work alongside you in the Imagine 185 role the last few years, and have so appreciated and enjoyed that time. But what advice would you have for me now leading the Community Foundation, stewarding your hard work and the hard work of so many others that have come before us? The organization's in such a strong position within the community. It's such a unique opportunity. What advice would you have?
Alex, you're just too kind. Honestly, I mean, again, the success of the Community Foundation is a result of many, many, many people. And when I think about you and your work, you already come equipped with so many assets and relationships that will help you. I've told the story that I was talking to a donor and I said, I need to introduce you to the next president. And I mentioned your name and he said, oh yeah, so-and-so told me all about him. And there we go. I mean, you have worked in the county and you've created relationships and built trust, which is very, very important in that position. And I think you already have that very important resource. Sure, I would probably say, don't say no first. You have a donor or a grantee or a thorny problem that walks in your door, right? Like, how different might the outcome of Imagine Early been if Clint hadn't asked me for funding, if he hadn't asked for the Community Foundation's support, right? So, and, whoever it is that says, can you help me figure this out? I think you have the resources and the quick learning and smarts to, if you can't do it yourself, you've got a relationship to take it to. So I know you'll do well. And I guess that's my advice. Don't say no. Just keep going.
Thanks, Patty. If anyone wants to learn more about the Community Foundation of Wabash County, learn more about the work of Imagine Early, learn about the impact, learn about how to enroll their own students in the program, I'll be sure that in the show notes we put those links and the information so that parents or community members can go and learn more about those initiatives and the things we've talked about today. Patty, what else haven't I asked you that would be important for a listener to know, either about you, about the Community Foundation, or about Wabash County?
You know what just came to mind when you were asking me about some other accomplishments or things? I'm very proud of the Learn More Center, which was the result of a Lilly Cape Grant Community Alliance to Promote Education. I would want any of our adult listeners that are looking to advance their skills to think about the Learn More Center, any of our donors that are embracing educational attainment for non-traditional students or adult workforce development and certifications. The Learn More Center does a great job. It was funded first by the Community Foundation. In fact, it was a program, not an organization, but a program of the foundation. So there's more to tell about the success of that organization. It's doing really well. And I'd want our listeners to know about that.
Yeah, absolutely. This podcast is made possible from our generous donors. Thank you for the support of the City of Wabash, the Gilman Investment Fund, the Sandra Kunkel Trust, Paperworks Industries, the Community Foundation of Wabash County, and Visit Wabash County. Patty, thank you so much for joining today, for the conversation, for all of your decades and pouring your career into this community. We'll have generations of young people from now that I've said before, but that'll get to reap the benefits of all of your hard work. And so just thank you for all you've done and continue to do for Wabash County.
Thank you, Alex. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. And thanks for your continued support and dedication.